It all started with Thomas, and now Bachmann Trains has 4 engines for your Thomas and Friends Railroad in large scale. What we'll do in this video is take a look at each of the engines and give you a close-up look so you can contrast and compare the different features and the looks of these engines. Let's take a look and see which of the engines is the longest. Believe it or not, it's not James, the big red engine, but it's actually Emily. She's longer than James. And if you take a quick look, believe it or not, Percy is shorter than Thomas. Let's take a quick look at some of the stats on these engines. Thomas is 14 inches long, 4.5 inches wide, 6.5 inches high, and weighs about 2.6 pounds. Percy is a little smaller. He's 13 inches long, 4.5 inches wide, 6 inches high, and 2.4 pounds. These measurements in length are from coupler to coupler. James is 24 inches long with his tender, 4.5 inches wide, 6.5 inches high, and 4.2 pounds. And the longest engine, Emily, with her tender, is 31 inches long, 4.5 inches wide, 8 inches high, and 5.2 pounds. One of the most important parts of the Thomas and Friends series are the faces, because that's who they are. Here's Thomas. Here's Percy. Here's James. And of course, the newcomer to the bunch, Emily. Let's take a quick look at the front of each engine. First, there's Thomas. You can see that there's a simulated light as well as some bumpers and a hook and loop coupler. The same thing for Percy. You might notice that the James and Emily engines have these larger international style hook and loop couplers, but they're all compatible and work together well. Let's take a look at the cab of each of the units. You can see here's Thomas with the 2 distinctive whistles, as well as the round porthole windows. You can see that Percy's cab is a little shorter. And then there's James and Emily with her distinctive gold-painted fittings. Thomas has a cab lid that comes off, as well as Percy's lid comes off as well, but the James and the Emily do not have a removable cab top. Many of the engines in the Thomas and Friends series have numbers. Well, in this series from Bachmann, the first engine that was made was Thomas, and he is engine number 1. The next numbered engine is James. He's number 5. Now there's Edward is 2, Henry is 3, and Gordon is 4, but they have not yet been manufactured or even announced. Percy is the next engine, and he is number 6. Emily does not have a number, but she is still considered part of the steam team. We wanted to take a look at the wheels on each of the engines, and we thought the best way to do that was to run them. What we did was set our power supply momentum to go up to about 8 volts and then come back down for each of the units. You can see that both Thomas and James have a similar configuration of their wheel set, and the middle wheel does not actually have a flange, which helps it go around smaller corners. It's fun to watch the spokes on Emily because as it starts to go faster, the spokes kind of look like they're going in the opposite direction. Let's take a look at the smokestacks on each of the engines. If you take a look at Thomas, you'll think that he has a short smokestack on his. But then when you look at Percy, you can see that his is even shorter. The white markings you see are reflections from the video lights that we use to film the engines. James has a short and stumpy stack, but take a look at Emily. Hers is tall, thin, and topped with gold paint. Let's investigate the coal loads on each of the engines. Thomas has a small coal load on the back, and if you take a look at Percy's, his looks very, very similar to the one that you'll find on Thomas. James has a full load in his tender, and if you take a look at Emily, you can see that her load is the biggest, which is true because she is the biggest engine. To get a full and complete look, let's take a look at the back of each of the engines. On the back of Thomas, you can see the bumpers and a pretend light. You can see the same thing on the back end of Percy as well. The back end of James is actually the tender, and it also has the bumpers, but the larger couplers. And you can see the same thing on Emily. Let's take a look at the underside of all of the units at one time. You can see there's quite a difference between each of the engines. Let's take a look at the underside of Thomas. You can see that the middle wheels on this engine do not have flanges, which helps it go around tighter curves. You can see that Percy has the most complicated setup with the rods on its drive wheels. And on James, you can see a similar configuration to Thomas, but at the front, you can see the pilot truck moves back and forth to help keep it on the track. Emily's a large engine. It has a large pilot wheel on the front, then the smaller drive wheel, and then the larger drive wheel. And then you'll also notice on the back of the engine, the trailing wheels work just like the pilot wheels on the front. And you'll notice two choices for the tender, which will allow you to go around tighter curves. Many of you have contacted us and asked us to see some side-by-side comparisons. So here you go. Here's Thomas and Percy. Here's Thomas and James. Here's Thomas and Emily. And now, so you can make sure that you see them all, let's take a look at Percy and James. Let's look at Percy and Emily. And of course, the two big engines, James and Emily. We hope you've enjoyed this video. It's been a little bit longer, but we wanted to give you as much comparison opportunities as possible. And this video will be online for as long as YouTube is around, so you can always come back and check the differences between the engines. We sure hope you get the opportunity to own at least one of these engines.